Hey, Mama, do you find yourself wishing you knew you were on the right path with your business? Or wanting to know how to do it all as a work at home mom and entrepreneur? If you struggle with imposter syndrome, mom guilt, or fear of failure, then you're in the right place. Hi, I'm Alexia, a Christian mindset coach passionate about teaching moms how to renew their minds to find success both in business and motherhood. You can overcome the negative thoughts holding you back from fully stepping into your calling. I know what it's like to worry your business will never work, to feel mom guilt every time you work on your business, to realize your mindset is hindering you, but not knowing how to change it in a Christ-centered way. I created the Mama with a Calling podcast to teach you how to use the powerful combination of God's Word and proven mindset strategies to help you break free from negative, paralyzing thoughts and gain clarity and confidence to go where God is leading you. As you step out of the old way of thinking and into God's way, you'll find more peace, joy, and purpose. Pop in those earbuds and get ready to let God work in you so He can work through you. Welcome back to another episode of the Mom with a Calling podcast. Today, I have special guest Lisa Stephen on the show. I will give her a chance to introduce herself in a minute, but she has a really amazing story of how God took something that was maybe hard at the time and did something amazing with that. And I wanted to share her story with you guys because I know a lot of us have things that we aren't sure where God's calling us, and a lot of times it's places that we don't even expect. So I hope her story is inspiring and encouraging. So thank you for being on the show today, Lisa.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Okay, so first just like dive right in and just tell us a little bit about your story and take us back to what started the whole thing.
Oh, thank you for asking. So, really what started the whole thing was becoming a teenage mom. My husband and I got pregnant when we were 17 years old and got married. We've been married for 38 years and have 3 adult children now, but it's been quite the journey. And along the way, there was a calling on my heart to serve teenage moms and to come alongside teen moms in the struggles that they have to overcome, because I was familiar with what that looked like, but it meant taking some turns in my journey as a mom myself that were unexpected. I thought that I would go to college. My kids finally got to the age where they were in school, and I'm like, okay, now I get to go to college and I get to go be a teacher or an administrator or something, whatever I had in my mind that I thought I was going to do with my life. And God, in His inevitable wisdom, had a different calling. And so He gave me the opportunity to volunteer with teen moms through MOPS, Mothers of Preschoolers, which is now called the Mom Co. But I have a long history with MOPS, so I'm trying to wrap my brain around the new title. But MOPS had begun in the late 90s, teenage moms MOPS groups. And so I got to volunteer with teen moms through that group. And I was just so shocked, honestly, because even though I'd grown up in a pretty chaotic home, I did not grow up in generational poverty and I had not experienced what that looked like. And so we had just so many mamas that were struggling with domestic violence in their homes or addiction with their parents or families and homelessness, living in their car, like crazy things. And so we were looking for what's out there for a resource for teen moms, who's providing housing for teenage moms in Denver. And literally no one then or now provided a home for a teenage mom who was already parenting. So there were maternity homes and there were shelters you could go to if you were over 21, but maternity homes, you had to be pregnant. And these were moms who were already parenting and were 16, 17, 18 years old. And so God just really laid it on my heart that we should open a home for teen moms. And honestly, it was my husband who we kind of tossed the idea around at our teen mops group. And then one night my husband came home and said, I think this might be a calling. And he had never used that word before or since. He's a very quiet guy. You can tell I talk a lot. So he had my attention right off the bat. And that was the beginning of the journey of it meant me throwing away my application to go to college. It meant me at the time thinking I was just setting those things aside. And then what would come to be is, I literally never did go back to college and I still type with 3 fingers, which my teenage moms today make an awful lot of fun of me because I type with 3 fingers, but I'm really fast. So following God's path is challenging and beautiful all at the same time.
Wow. Okay. So I want to go back a little bit though, because of course in your synopsis it sounded so easy. Like
Yeah.
just start a group, a home for women or for
Home.
teen moms. But so can we dive into that time a little bit? Because a lot of times we have and maybe you didn't, but I want to hear if you did, or what that was like for you, feeling like, can I even do this? Like just because the idea
Oh.
is there or you wish it was there, how did you know it was for you to do?
Well, thank you for asking. That is exactly why I wrote the book, A Place to Belong, because my story of being the founder and executive director of a nonprofit, which sounds all fancy, um, literally was outside of completely outside of my ability and completely outside of my education or lack thereof. So, um, even though it was, I knew in my heart when my husband came home and said that this is something we're supposed to do. Like, I think this is a calling. We'd been going through a Bible study called Experiencing God by Henry Blackaby. And there was, I know it's such a great Bible study if you've never done it. And there's a piece in that Bible study where you learn about the crisis of faith. And I really came to that moment of like, this crisis of faith of like, I have things I want to do and I finally get to do them. And those are the things that are going to equip me to do other things. And instead, you're asking me to do something that I don't know how to do. Nobody knows who I am. We have no money. It's not like I have a platform. And back when we started Hope House, there weren't even cell phones. So there was no social media or anything. This was the year 2000. So I said yes, really honestly, just because I couldn't not say yes. Like, it was one of those moments where God is knocking on your heart and saying, I have this for you. And you have a choice to either move forward and say yes, which is what the book is about. Like, what if you say yes, even if you are not equipped? You've got this like thing in your heart or your head that just won't let go, and you know God's knocking on your heart, but you're not equipped. You're don't have the education, or you don't have the background, or you don't have money, or you don't even have a connection to whatever this thing is that you have such a heart for. So how am I supposed to even move forward? And it was literally a crisis of faith in, can I actually do this? And then once we made the decision to move forward, it was just a daily, honestly, every single day, step by step, like, who knows about nonprofit stuff? I need to find someone who does, and calling to see if I could go to coffee with a friend who knew someone that ran a nonprofit. And it was a series of meeting people who knew something I didn't know. And it took 3 whole years to develop Hope House. By the end of which I was seriously convinced that I had heard God wrong and that this was all in my head because it was so much work for so long, and such a journey.
Um, yeah, we all go, wait, did we hear God right? Like as we're in the
Mhm.
middle of something. And I love that it sounds like you just decided, like, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And it, like you said, that crisis of faith. And it's like when stuff like 3 years, when you're in the middle of that, we call it like the messy middle, right? Like it's not even
Huh.
for you, it was like the messy middle of getting started, like to have it. When you say 3 years, you mean like for it to be open and ready to go and
Right.
all of that. Yeah. So then
Exactly.
there's
three
like
years.
other messy middles once you get started. But like that, the beginning phases of that. So in the middle of that, it sounds like you decided. And so you just kept going. But was that the thing that drove you to keep going? Because if you don't see anything happening for years, right? How did you
Yeah.
continue to move forward? Was it the vision that you had? What was driving you to continue?
Yeah, so, well, a couple of things. I was still working with teenage moms through Teen MOPS, and that drove me because there's a really sad story in the book about one of our beautiful mamas named Tracy who accepted Christ while she was in our Teenage Moms MOPS group. And in the process of that, she decided to ask her boyfriend, who was much, much older than her, like he was 40 and she was 19, to leave. And it was a domestic violence situation, and it was a rough thing that she asked him to leave. And unfortunately, after he left, about 3 months later, she hurt her back and couldn't care for her twin daughters by herself, and allowed him to move back in to help with her twins, who were 2. And when she asked him to leave the second time, it did not go well. And he ended up killing her and shooting himself in the parking lot outside their apartment. And it was such a horrible reminder of, and for a minute there, there was so much kind of attack around that. It was like, well, we need to just stop working on this. And I wasn't doing this alone. I was working with a group of 4 women who were co-founders that were all part of this Teen MOPS group. I'm the only one still here today, but they were so foundational because we weren't doing it alone there at the beginning, and our husbands were all on board. But that was a moment where it was like, maybe we should just stop. Like, this is way too hard. It was such a tragedy. And but in the midst of that, several months before Tracy was killed, she had written one of the very first checks ever to be written to Hope House, Colorado. And at the bottom of her check, she signed 15. She wrote it for $15, and she signed, "May all our dreams come true." And I have that still framed on my desk, and I keep it by me all the time because it's such a reminder that we're doing this because there's an urgent need. We're not just doing this because it's something that I think we should do, or I mean, of course it's because God called, but there's an urgent burning need for somewhere safe for teenage moms. And if there had been a place for Tracy when she had asked her boyfriend to move back in, maybe she wouldn't have had to do that. And I should clarify, we are not a domestic violence shelter. Our home was, we certainly have a lot of securities in place, but we're not a domestic violence shelter. And that is what Tracy would have needed at that time. But it was just a huge and urgent reminder that we couldn't give up. Like, we had to keep going. So it was literally every day, if there's one more thing to do, just do that thing. So if there's one call I could make, one letter I could write, one person I could connect with to learn their story. And we were raising money, and it's really hard to raise money for something that doesn't exist yet. We had formed our nonprofit so we could raise money. And I think we'd raised about 80,000 maybe by the time we opened, which seemed like a lot of money, but was not much when you were going to have to pay staff.
Mm-hmm. Right. No, I like that because it's, obviously a tragic incident happened, but like you're saying, it's that desire to serve the people that you're called to serve. And it's like you're going to keep going, even though you don't see how it's going to work. But just that
Yeah.
desire to keep, it just wasn't going away. So you just
Yeah.
continued. So I'd like to look at the flip side of that and talk about, well, let's explain a little bit. We're kind of saying it, but what is it? Like, explain what Hope House is for people who are listening.
So our mission at Hope House is to empower parenting teenage mamas to become self-sufficient, and our heart is for them to come to know how much Jesus loves them. So we now serve about 265 teen moms a year and 400 children of those mothers. They come into our program between the ages of 15 and 20, already parenting, and we serve them until they turn 25. And we offer 3 primary programs, our educational programming, which is GED, college and career, financial literacy, and then a bunch of like personal growth work. So healthy relationships, counseling, opportunities to build your faith and to build community with other teen moms. And then we have a housing support program that includes our residential home that was, we have a crazy miracle story in the book about the home being donated to us eventually after those 3 years. And then picked up and moved off the property it sat on to be moved to land next door to a church that donated the land for the house to sit on. So the book details this crazy miracle stories of how God built Hope House, literally. So we have that residential home where we can serve 6 moms and their kids, and then we serve the rest of them through partnerships with other housing programs. And then our last and most recent program is our early childhood education program. So we have a just opened the doors 1 month ago, an early learning center to offer licensed full-time care to the children of our teen moms, so they can go to school and work full-time. So we have a 3-acre campus in Arvada, Colorado, and our mamas come from all over the Denver metro area, and we're just in the process of beginning to do expansion work. We have 2 additional homes, one in northern Colorado, one in southern Colorado, and our first out-of-state location opening in Orange County, California.
Wow. Did you envision that it would become all of that when you started?
No way. And I think honestly, if God gave us the whole picture at the very beginning, we would run terrified the other direction. Like, he gave me enough of a big vision that it was already terrifying. So just taking that one little bite of the elephant at a time, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
But if he had shown me what it would be in the end, I would have said, I am 100% not qualified. And I already felt not qualified. But if I'd have known all of it and how much, there's just so much to learn along the way. So we're 22 years old now as an organization. So we've grown a lot, but it wasn't overnight. None of it was overnight.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk a little bit about, can you share some of the impact that's been had overall, and because I think a lot of times we want to, I mean, for the women that I've talked to for sure, like we want to have something that matters and do something that matters
Yeah.
to impact others. So obviously you're helping these moms, but is there something that stands out to you as a story of impact from saying yes to this and starting this organization?
Yeah, so I'll give you two quick stories. One is an organizational story, a ministry story. So when I got the call that this group was going to donate the house to us, they were about to develop a piece of property and they were going to tear this house down. They offered to give it to us with the provision that it be moved. And then we couldn't find anywhere to move it to. And we didn't have any, we were barely raising enough money to pay our payroll for people to stay with the mamas overnight. I did not know what a capital campaign was. Um, didn't have enough money to do much of anything with, and literally kind of got to the point where it's like, well, I don't know how this is going to move forward. And a pastor I'd never even met called me and said, "Are you the people looking for land? I've heard you're looking." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, we have some we want to give you." And that, first of all, was stunning. And I don't even think I said thank you. I was so shocked. But what happened next was we thought we would have to rezone this little piece of property that they wanted to donate to us. So we went down to the city planner's office to find out how to do that. And they said, "No way. This house has to be moved within 2 months for the project that was going to happen on the land that it sat on. There's no way that can happen. Rezoning takes over a year." And my co-founder just kind of quietly said, "Can you just check what the zoning is on this little piece we need to subdivide?" And the planner goes over to this big old lateral cabinet and pulls out this big plat map. And right down there in the corner was a big green R4, which was the exact subdividing zoning that we needed for a group home, essentially. And she was stunned. We were stunned. And it turned out that the church who donated the land to us 25 years prior had zoned just that one piece of their property for a maternity home and then never put ministry on that land. And so they somehow thought we were a blessing. We were like, "You've got to be kidding." And I was like, this is the example of how God knows the beginning from the end. Because 25 years, way before I was ever even a teenage mom, God knew that I would be a teenage mom, that he would use those people that had the faith to zone that land the way they did, and that he would use someone else's willingness to donate a piece of a home for this home to be moved. He knew all that and he put it all together, like he knit it together. And that's one of the huge crazy miracle stories in the book. And it's so, to me, so valuable and so critical for people to know God doesn't just do miracles like overseas or back in the Bible times. Like he still does miracles in my life as a mom, in your life as a mom, like right in your backyard. And if he's tapping on your shoulder, it's for a reason. He's going to do miracles in your life and around your life.
I love, it's like a real life example from experiencing God, like the way, like those things where you're saying yes and you don't know how you're going to do the thing that you're saying yes to, and then God shows up in this big way. I love that
Yeah.
story. So what was your second story?
So the second one is just a story of impact with one of our moms. So we had a mama named Janelle who came to our GED program, and she was really quiet. She didn't say a lot, but she worked hard. And one night she called me and told me that we knew that she was in and out of a not great relationship and would get kicked out of the boyfriend's mom would kick her out on occasion, but typically her two boys stayed with dad and she would go sleep in her car. Well, on this particular night, it was a February night in Colorado and we had a big snowstorm coming, and she called and said, my boyfriend's mom kicked me out, but I've got the boys with me and I'm afraid I don't have enough gas in the car to keep us warm all night. And we have to sleep in the car. And so I, of course, was like, "That's not happening." So I went and picked her up. We got her in a hotel room for a couple of nights, and then we were able to get her into our residential program. And she just thrived there. The structure, the stability, the love of the staff. She accepted God into her life. She got her GED. She went on to get a degree in an associate's in applied science, and came in one day. By this point she'd moved out of the residential home, was in her own apartment. Came to Hope House one day and told the college and career coordinator she had an opportunity to have an internship at a place called Ball Aerospace. And should I even bother? Like, what is this, internship? And our college and career coordinator is like, yes, you need to take this internship. So today, Janelle is a machinist at Ball Aerospace, and she is in a healthy relationship. She's married. They've bought their own home, and her two boys are thriving in school. And she has literally broken the cycle of poverty for her kids. And that means her kids also are not growing up in poverty. So the cycle's broken for generations to come. And the impact that you may make as a mama, it may not be, sometimes when I talk about these crazy, amazing stories, it sounds like, oh, that's not something I could ever do. I didn't do those things overnight. Like the first thing I did was just say yes to volunteering. Like I volunteered for a Teen MOPS group and got to know one mom and then another mom and then a few more people. And I had this opportunity to be a leader in a couple different ways. And so it's a journey. Like you may just say yes to it. Maybe you're saying yes to a great big huge thing. Like I want you to start a nonprofit, but maybe you're saying yes to volunteering, or you're saying yes to a relationship, with someone that you weren't sure about, a mentor, or it might be something smaller that God's leading you toward something. So I always want to be careful not to leave mamas feeling overwhelmed, because as mothers, we have a lot. I mean, just getting the kids fed and keeping those small humans alive is like a thing. So then to add on top of it, okay, God wants me to do what? Can feel so overwhelming. And definitely if it's him calling you, it's going to be something that gives you energy and feeds you, even in those times where you're also giving baths and making dinner and cleaning the house and all the things as a mother.
I think it's really great that you mentioned that, because it's true. We can sometimes, like you said, get overwhelmed with the idea of doing something big, or even sort of discount the small things. Like that's not really God, or they don't matter. But as you've sort of alluded to, like those little yeses, those little things lead to bigger things. Like
Yes.
we don't get to decide what's going to happen, and we really shouldn't
Yeah.
shouldn't be trying to do them just for those big moments, right? With what we want to see that impact, but all of it, even if nothing big happens, it's like we're still walking in obedience, and God's going to use it. Like you're saying about the land and different things, like there are so many things that had to be orchestrated there, that God will use everything, no matter big or small, right? He's going to use it in ways that we may not
Exactly.
even know about.
Exactly. One of the things I loved most when we were doing Teen MOPS was we had a mama she just loved brownies. No one had ever made her homemade brownies in her whole life. And we made homemade brownies and brought them in, and she was like in tears because someone made her homemade brownies and they heard her, like they heard what she wanted and actually acted on it. And that hadn't happened in her life. And it was such a small thing
Mm.
to make homemade brownies, but it was not small to her. So you just never know what you're doing in someone's heart or life just with those small acts of obedience that God asks us to do.
I love that, because it's like God sees her. It's like she's loved, she's seen, she's valued. It
Yes. Yeah.
matters. Like you want brownies, let's make brownies. I love
Yeah.
that example. So you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but I wanted to. It's a little bit of a detour, but just quickly, I guess, is the one of the things you do is you help break this cycle of generational poverty. Um, you said that like for you, you didn't experience that, but you saw it working with the Teen MOPS group. So I think so. I talk about money a lot on the podcast, because even though people may or may not be teen moms, but like we have a lot of issues around money as Christians,
Yeah.
and
So true.
this thought of like earning more, or I don't know, it's a struggle. So can you talk a little bit about what you do to help break that generational poverty?
Yeah, so I think something I did not know when we started Hope House at all, this was learned along the way, is that there's a difference between situational poverty and generational poverty. So I grew up in situational poverty. So my dad didn't work; he was an alcoholic. So he kind of was every once in a while he had a job. So we were on food stamps off and on. But my household was middle class, and what I mean by that is we have poverty class values, middle class values, and generational or wealth class, like generational wealth values. So you oftentimes hear when somebody wins the lottery that they spend all their money and then they don't have any money left and they never fit in with that wealth class. Well, there's a whole there are hidden rules to every class, whether it's poverty class, middle, or wealth class. In the generational poverty class, that means these families have experienced generations of trauma, generations of addiction, of being on the system, of abuse in the home. Most of our teenage moms literally don't know anybody who's married. Nobody in their family is married. They haven't seen marriage. They haven't seen healthy homes. They have sort of an idea that all households look like this. All kids get, smacked and beat really for discipline. And it's not until they get older and they get into like middle school and they start seeing other households where they're like, this isn't the way everybody's house works. This isn't normal or right. And they're angry at that point. So they're acting out of their anger and they're making decisions and choices out of anger. And when oftentimes, at least for us, when they become a teenage mom, that's sort of the moment that becoming pregnant, and especially not just becoming pregnant, but giving birth. So no matter how old you are or what class you're in, when you give birth to a baby and they put that baby in your arms, like all bets are off. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. How am I going to raise this baby? There's no handbook for this. And this teenage mom's just, holding this baby and going, now what? I will do anything to change these patterns for my baby. I just need someone to show me how, because I've never seen an example. And so we could do a little of that in Teen MOPS. We're able to do a lot of that at Hope House. And it's a very long process, and that's why we serve them until they turn 25 to come to understand like how I operate in a middle class environment. And all of our systems in America are built on middle class values. And the example that I always use is it's a terrible statistic, but a middle class 3-year-old has a working vocabulary of 1,200 words. A poverty class adult has a working vocabulary of 900 words. So if you're an adult person with a working vocabulary that is less than that of a middle class 3-year-old, how do you ever navigate libraries, banks, the school systems? Like, these parents don't come to parent-teacher conferences. They don't bank. They don't go to the library. Children don't have books because parents don't realize the importance of reading. And even if they did, they're scared of them. They don't have the words. They don't have the vocabulary. So it's incredibly difficult to move from one class system into another class system. And we don't even talk about this a lot in our country because we're so careful. But it just is. It is true. And so it's a journey for our moms to kind of have an entirely different, like a worldview shift of what is possible for them. All of our moms who go to college are first generation college students. Many of them are first generation graduates of high school or graduates with their GED. And they don't know that there's such a thing as a Pell Grant. So they can go to college on a Pell Grant, which will pay for typically up to an associate's degree level. So there's just so much for them to learn that has been completely hidden. It's not a part of the world that they've grown up in, and they don't know it's there. So there are a lot of aha moments, and sometimes those aha moments also come with, okay, now I might need some counseling because I've just realized that everything in my world that I thought was the way the world worked is not the way the world works for everyone. And now I don't know what to do with that. I'm holding that like pain and anger and hurt that things weren't fair. They were so hard, but they will do it. Like, they will literally leap tall buildings for their children. The hardest thing they do is the mental health and personal growth work. Earning your GED or going on to college, those are things that, not that they're easy, but it's a goal I can see. It's the goals that they set around building healthy relationships and changing generational patterns of unhealthy relationships. That is the hardest work they do at Hope House.
Mm-hmm. Oh goodness. I love I mean, I love that that's part of the process. It's not just housing them and, providing these structures for them, but really getting at changing not only their, like you said, the generational poverty, but with that comes these patterns of behavior, the relationships and the ripple effect. I love thinking about the ripple effect of what God calls us to do because when you're helping moms like that, like you're literally impacting their children and their like it just goes
Yes.
out and what they're gonna do. Um and because they're in survival mode. I mean, they are not
Yeah.
only did they probably grow up in survival mode, but now they as a teen mom, they're in like survival mode. And so allowing them to step in and just to think differently and see what's possible, what's available to them, it shakes your reality when you realize that like, wait a minute, wait a minute, there are
Yeah.
these other options. And so that can be kind of traumatic in and of itself, right? And like getting that strong foundation, and helping them to believe in themselves, I'm sure, is part of the process too. And like, because I feel like a lot of the women that I coach, I have, even though I don't know all their background stories all the way back, but a lot of times women have a hard time receiving that God really wants that goodness for them, that God really wants them to have abundance, that God really wants them to have this like this amazing life. And not that doesn't mean we're not going to have hardships. It doesn't mean God's not going to call
Right.
us to do hard things, but it's like hard to believe and to receive that love. Like that's hard.
That's so true. And I love that point. It's such an equalizer. So moms across the board, no matter where you live, no matter your, background, poverty, middle class, whatever, all moms have trouble with self-care. Like all moms think that they just give and give and give, right? Like there's so much on us as moms. And it's so crazy to me. One of the favorite classes we have here at Hope House is self-care. And almost always when you ask a mom, what'd you learn at Hope House? She'll always reference, I learned that it's okay to take care of myself because I can't take care of my little one unless I'm taking care of myself. And that's true for all of us as moms. Like it's okay to give myself permission to take that 10 minutes to sit down with a book or with God or just to take a shower and ask
Mhm.
someone else to take care of the kiddos for 15 minutes. Like it's so hard to care for ourselves as moms. And you always use the example of the airplane and putting the oxygen on yourself before you put it on your child. But to really truly grasp that and believe that for yourself, that I'm worth that.
Mhm.
That takes, I think that's hard for all moms, but certainly for our moms, it takes a while for them to begin to understand that God sees them differently than maybe they see themselves. And that's something we work on so much. Like God sees you as bright and beautiful and strong and resilient and full of grit and determination. And he doesn't see you as um, troublesome or you've made mistakes. Or most of our moms, if they had an experience with God, it's they really feel like if there is a God, he must hate me, or he's just super mad at me because why does my life look like this? So for them to really come to understand God chose you, no matter
Mhm.
how old you were, no matter where you live, no matter what, he chose you. He doesn't mess up. He picked you to be mama to this child, and he will give you what you need to be that mama. And we're just blessed we get to be a part of that through Hope House. But in other people's communities, it might be Teen MOPS, it might be Young Lives, which is the kind of teen mom arm of Young Life. It might be a group within your church, or maybe you start your own. And everybody has a heart for something different. My heart happens to be for teenage moms, but whatever it is, it's just that one little yes. I'm gonna put one little foot in the water and take one little step. Um, Man, I encourage you, mamas, do that because I tell you what, moms are leaders. Moms are leaders in their households. Moms are leaders in this world, and women can make great things happen, and God wants that for us and through us.
Yeah, no, amen. I believe that. Um, so I want to talk a little bit about your book. So A Place to Belong. Can you talk about what the book covers? Because it goes into a lot of this and how you decided it was time to write a book about this.
Yeah, so very ironically, the kind of one of the themes of the book is what if you said yes? And I did not say yes to that book for probably 2 to 3 years. I did not want to write it.
Yeah.
I knew my husband kept saying, and one of the pastors on our board kept saying, like, this is part of your kingdom building work. You've been writing the journals, like I did. I've journaled Hope House from the beginning, which I was never a journaler. I just had to write this stuff down as we were going along because I had to get it out of my head, and then I could reference back to like, okay, God did do this little thing, and okay, now he's going to do one more little thing. So I had the journals, but I also knew deep down in my heart that telling the story didn't just mean I was happy to share the miracles God had done. I love talking about the miracles God has done. I do not love talking about my own childhood and my own traumas. And so I was like,
Mhm.
I'm not writing a book and telling the whole world my whole like life. That's like so uncomfortable. And I knew if I said yes, I'd need to do that. And so it took me at least 2 years to say yes, but I did finally. So the book is really it's a beautiful testament to the miracles that God does. Secondly, it is my own personal story, my own personal why for loving and working with teenage moms. But what I mostly love is sharing the stories of those kind of first moms at Hope House, those first teenage moms that came and worked so hard and were like the guinea pigs a lot of times at Hope House because they were our first moms, and now where they are today. Our very first mom, her name was Fendia. She came from Haiti. Her daughter now is 20 years old, and her daughter is a sophomore at a university studying psychiatric nursing. So there are stories like that where these moms who are our very first teenage moms are now, 35 to 38, and their children are like 15 to 20, and what they're doing. And just those beautiful stories like Janelle of truly breaking the cycle for generations to come.
I love that. So if anybody wants to connect with you, where can they get in touch with you, find the book, all of those things?
Yeah, so you can find A Place to Belong on Amazon or on our website. You can learn more about Hope House at hopehousecolorado.org, O-R-G. And if you happen to live in the Denver metro area, come for a tour.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Lisa. This is such an inspiring story, and I love hearing all of the impact it's had. And I'm sure you're going to continue to do great and wonderful things.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Mama with a Calling podcast. As always, you'll find the show notes for today's episode at mamawithacalling.com/podcast. Really quick before you head out, are you loving these episodes? To make sure this podcast gets in the ears of as many mamas as possible, please head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. I'm going to be reading your reviews on the podcast, so I can't wait to hear from you. Also, if you know someone that needs to hear these episodes, grab a screenshot and share it on Instagram, and don't forget to tag me at Mama with a Calling so I can share it in my stories. Until next time, keep pursuing your calling.